night, right? Like when you're a kid, you start playing football, you're maybe playing on Sunday morning, then, you get to high school and, you play in the JV game and that's on Thursday afternoon and everything's building up to being able to play on Friday nights, So I think that's exactly what it is.
Yeah. So J.J. Watt to the Packers, it would be tight economically, but I do think, I do believe sometimes that symbolically acquisitions matter. I thought Gronk to Tampa symbolically mattered. The band's back together. The system's coming down from New England. That stuff, man, I think J.J. Watt Packers, is there a hope for it? Is there a shot for it, Albert?
Yeah, I mean, they're kicking it around. The Packers have some, cap issues that they're going to have to wade through. As the cap stands right now, they would be over. They restructured David Bakhtiari the other day. That's a step in the right direction. So, I mean, they'd have to work through some of this stuff. But I certainly think if you want to respond to what Aaron Rodgers was saying a few weeks ago after they got eliminated, this would be a way to do it. The same way that, Rob Gronkowski, I think, in the beginning at least, was a little bit of an olive branch to Tom Brady and saying, hey, we're going to be aggressive here. We're going to do everything it takes. We're going to operate with a sense of urgency because we know your window's limited. Going and getting J.J. Watt now and doing it before free agency starts, I think would be sort of a sign to Aaron Rodgers, like, hey, we're not sitting on our hands here. We're going to be aggressive going forward.
Yeah. So Carson Wentz, listen, nobody know if he can be solved. The feeling is if he went to Indianapolis with Frank Reich, those would be the best odds. But Chris Ballard is judicious. Chris Ballard is patient. He is measured. They're not throwing away draft picks. So my takeaway is Chicago may be in a more desperate situation where Ryan Pace and Matt Nagy may have a year get run. So if you're asking me this morning where Carson Wentz goes, I'm thinking the Colts would probably be more measured in their offer than the Bears would, and therefore I would think Chicago would be the front runner this morning.
I would follow your instinct on that. I think Chicago is the front runner this morning. And I do know that there's a feeling inside that building from Ryan Pace, from the coaching staff, Matt Nagy, John DeFilippo, their pass game coordinator, who got, two of the best years out of Carson Wentz in 2016 and 17 as his quarterback's coach. They believe that mechanically they can fix him. Now, one of the issues with Carson Wentz is that he hasn't always responded very well to hard coaching. And so that's something they'd have to get past because John DeFilippo was the bad cop in Philadelphia. I think the issue right now, Colin, is where Carson Wentz wants to go. I think it's become pretty clear he'd rather go to Indianapolis. And I think part of it now for the Eagles is going to be, okay, if our best return right now is Chicago over Indy, then we need to convince Carson Wentz, this is the only place you're going, bud. And you need to buck up and accept this and realize that the Bears are going to give you a good chance. And I can understand why Carson Wentz would be skeptical because, look, Indianapolis, they're stable. Chris Ballard, Frank Reich, they're going nowhere. In Chicago, you'd be going to play for guys whose jobs are going to be on the line in 2021. But I think it's pretty clear at this point that the Bears have pushed harder than the Colts to get Carson Wentz. The Eagles are probably going to get their best return with Carson Wentz going to Chicago. I think the last piece of it then would become, can you convince Carson Wentz it's the right thing to do? Because I think the Bears would like to at least know that Carson Wentz is on board before pulling the trigger on a trade.
So Russell Wilson has never been about controversy. He's go Hawks, very positive. And I said, there's a little Tom Brady effect here. So Brady goes to Tampa and he gets Gronk and he gets Fournette and they go all in. And Russell Wilson, a couple days after Tommy does that, is sitting there thinking, so I got no say in personnel. I got an outdated offense. I get no say in the coordinator. And I do feel like, and I don't blame athletes for this, I do feel like Russell's looking over at Tampa thinking, I'm in the same class as Tommy is. I got no juice inside the organization. That's what it felt like to me. He just wanted to be heard and said, you can occasionally ask your star quarterback about personnel. He can have an opinion too. That's what it felt like to me.
Well, I'll just tell you this. There has been grumbling from Russell Wilson's camp in the past. The Seahawks have been down this road with him before. You might remember a few years ago, it was pretty out there. Now, it didn't come from his mouth, but it was pretty out there how, he wasn't happy with the progress the offensive line had made. They went and traded for Dwayne Brown. That solved some of those issues. I think what you're seeing here, though, Colin, is really more about, I think quarterbacks having cover now to come and say some of these things publicly. And I think it really started with Aaron Rodgers, but some of this stuff is along the same lines. And it's along the lines of what you're talking about, too, between Rodgers and Wilson. And they're not just looking at Tom Brady. They're looking at the other teams that were there at the end. The Bucs were very aggressive. And look, every touchdown in that game, in that Super Bowl game, was scored by somebody who was acquired after Tom Brady.
Wow.
It was Antonio Brown. It was Rob Gronkowski. It was Leonard Fournette.
Wow.
Those guys were acquired after Brady, and they went to Tampa because of Brady. Now look at how aggressive Buffalo's been about putting people around Josh Allen. They go and get Stephon Diggs. How aggressive the Chiefs have been about putting people around Patrick Mahomes. So I think, Aaron Rodgers' willingness to come out and say something was more about putting pressure on the Packers than anything else. And I think Rodgers saying something then gave Wilson cover to say something in Seattle. So I think what you have now is sort of this pressure from some of the elite quarterbacks in the NFL who are looking at their own situation, looking at the teams that were standing there at the end and saying to themselves, is my team being aggressive enough and going and getting me help? And if they aren't, well, now it's actually okay for me to go and say something about it.
By the way, listen, you can't. As I watched the Super Bowl, I just came back to, good God, Tampa's packed. They have so many quality players, but you can't pay everybody. And will the Buccaneers look a little different next year? Who are they going to have to move off? Somebody's going to get paid and they can't afford it.
Well, the first big decision they're going to have to make is who they franchise. And is it going to be Shaq Barrett, who they franchised last year, or Chris Godwin? My sense would be Godwin, which would mean Barrett would make it to the market, and Barrett, as a top pass rusher, is going to get paid. So are you willing to go the distance to pay him? Then it's Levante David, Rob Gronkowski. There are some star players who you assume will be back, and Ndamukong Suh, who you assume will be back, but at what price will they be back? So I think there are going to have to be at least a couple hard decisions made in the mosaic of all of those. The good news, though, Colin, is now that Tampa's kind of become a destination, you might be able to get, I think, some of the advantage that New England operated with over the last 20 years, where there are going to be a few guys who are going to wind up on that roster who are ring chasing. And it's going to be older guys, like third contract type guys. But it's also going to be like the young veteran who's 26 or 27 who goes out to the market, says, maybe I don't quite like what I'm being offered right now. Why don't I do a 1-year deal with the Buccaneers and reestablish my stock? And so I think with those younger veterans and the older veterans, there's going to be some opportunity for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers to get some bargains here with some guys who are looking to ring chase. So they lose some guys, but they also operate with the benefit that New England operated with over the last 20 years.
Yeah, this is not a small thing. It's got good weather. There's no state tax. Tampa is one of the last larger cities in America where housing prices are realistic. It's a nice place to live. I lived there for a couple years. To your point, they win. It's cheap. It's by water. It's a great. You got Busch Gardens. You got Disneyland. It's funny. It's funny how now I look at Tampa and I think, what a place to go play. What a fantastic organization. The power of Brady. Now it's wildly attractive, right?
It's a destination. Right. Absolutely. I mean, look, and it doesn't matter what position you're playing, right? It'd be great to catch the ball from Tom Brady if you're a guy on that side of the ball, but even defensive players, look at what Todd Bowles has built the last 2 years there. I talked to a couple of their players over the weekend, and they're excited about the next level that this defense can go to because of the opportunities that Todd Bowles has been able to afford for them. So, it's a player-friendly culture. Players have input there. Like you said, the weather's great, no state income tax. And if you're one of these guys who needs to reestablish his stock and go somewhere in a 1-year deal, it's a good place to go. And if you're a guy in the back end and